We welcome the opportunity to speak on the motion, the bill. Can I say, somebody said to me in the last hour or two in the cars there, how are things progressing with this government, and what progress has been made, and what potential is there for it to succeed, or for this Dáil to be a success? And we have to reserve judgment on the way in which business is being and is about to be done, and what effect it can have on those whom gave us the privilege to be here and seek to resolve many of the issues that we were elected to address. We're in a new space, in a new situation, and there's a new dynamic. And there's a huge disparity, as we all know, of various representation around the Dáil. There is undoubtedly going to be new ways in which business is done, new rules and new methods. And they're not laid down in stone or anything like that, but people have to be cognizant of those rules, have to be cognizant of the way in which one can hope to try and effect the sort of change we want to see. And from our perspective, in our party, we didn't win enough seats to lead government. We didn't win enough votes in the votes for Taoiseach in order to lead government. And having failed on both of those counts, we still felt that there was a responsibility on us to act responsibly, to act like Republicans and Democrats, and allow the people an opportunity to have a government out of the configuration that we have. So we sought to facilitate the formation of a government with certain provisos. We know and we accept that undoubtedly the greatest challenge facing the state, facing the economy, facing society is in the whole area of housing. There's a chronic situation out there. There's a crisis, there's an emergency. And the good faith and intention of members of Sinn Fein, who initially proposed the setting up of a special housing committee during the intervening period between the election and the formation of government, and it went somewhat beyond, and there was a date fixed, was proposed. And I acknowledged that, I supported it, I welcomed it, and there has been a huge effort made by all members, from all parties and none, to consult with the stakeholders, to consult with the sector, to consult with all aspects of society, both from the state, from the private sector, and those on the voluntary basis whom are working at the coalface, with a concerted effort on the part of all concerned to seek to bring forward a consensus amongst that disparity of representation, to make honest, forthright recommendations, to acknowledge the fact that the conventional methods, the conventional processes, the conventional ways in which housing and the provision of housing was funded needed to be addressed. And there are many worthwhile, credible recommendations that will emanate from that committee. And I congratulate its chair, John Curran, for the manner and the fashion in which he conducted the affairs of that committee. I congratulate all those who worked, and the members and the staff and the executive who helped and assisted in the provision of a report that will be produced next Friday. And it will seek to address the provision of housing from the public sector, from the private sector, to address the area of mortgage distress and mortgage difficulties, to address the area of the rental sector, to seek to provide solutions that can be taken on board by local authorities, by approved housing bodies, by colleges in the provision of accommodation on their campuses, and the whole area of affordability for many professionals and others who can no longer afford accommodation that may be provided in our larger cities and towns. And you think of the likes of the Googles and others like them, who can provide many top-class jobs. But as good as those jobs are, and as good a qualifications as those who acquire those jobs, and as good as the pay might be, they still can't provide and aspire to own their own home, and that is to be addressed. But that's only one issue, the whole issue in relation to rent certainty, rent tenure, the quality of tenure, the availability of those who find themselves in the ridiculous situation whereby mortgage to rent properties are being taken from under their noses and leaving them outside on the road, again, is to be addressed. So there's a holistic approach that has to come out of that committee, with a view to it making recommendations to the Minister and his department, whom has acknowledged that the conventional methods and means and processes and funding models can no longer sustain the extraordinary amount of investment that is required in order to address the extraordinary situation that prevails. And I too, like the Minister, I acknowledge the good intentions by the proposer of tonight's bill. But in proposing and being the one to the forefront, together with others, of putting a committee in place that sought to instruct and help and assist the government of the day to address this issue in the way in which an all-party committee believes it can and it should, the Minister too and his department and his government must acknowledge the onus and responsibility that they have to take on board much of what is being presented by such a committee, because it is representative of this Dáil and by the people by association. Because they don't have the power to disregard anymore. They don't have the power to fail to adequately analyse and scrutinise the proposals that's coming from this side of the House, as they could have done in the past, but most especially because of the magnitude of this issue. And I am prepared to be, insofar as I can, be responsible, be pragmatic, afford the opportunity that those who have been given the privilege to do so, to address these issues, having taken on board the recommendations, having taken on board the good intentions and the best of intentions and the will and the hard work of those involved in the committee and their parties and all associated with it. And I think there should be respect given to that process. And I don't think it's fair or appropriate to come forward with this bill, as well-meaning as I said as it is, which is simplistic in nature, but not only that, addresses one issue where there are many issues to be addressed in a holistic fashion. And that's why I think it undermines the work of that committee. That's why I think it's usurping and gazumping that committee. And I too would earnestly ask that this debate on its conclusion would be adjourned until such time that the report is laid before the House, that the report is debated, analysed, scrutinised and improved if necessary, or where necessary, by others in this House who have the opportunity to do so. And at that stage, there is a united approach on the part of us all to make a recommendation to the Minister to address this great and huge crisis that is there. And if he or his government fail to take on board those issues, if they fail to deal with in a new way, in an overhauled way, in a new consensus, well then the potential future of the government is at stake. Because as I said at the beginning and at the outset, that we all agree that this is the greatest crisis facing the economy, facing our society as it stands presently, and has been for the last 2 years, unfortunately. But we sought, or this Dáil, or the government that had the power in the last Dáil, felt or thought it could deal with that issue in the old conventional style that had dealt with it in years past, but cannot accommodate the sort of investment that is required nowadays. Because the fiscal rules, for example, that govern the amount of spending that can be made by government in this area would not address this issue in the manner in which it has to be. There has to be, as I said, extraordinary investment of many multiples of what was ever invested in the past. And that can be done through special purpose initiatives off balance sheet. That can involve the state, that can involve the housing agencies, that can involve the NTMA, that can involve the private sector, that can involve the credit unions who wish to participate also. And all of that can combine to create an opportunity over a 2-year period, hopefully, where we can address this situation and look back on it and say there's a commitment that was made by the Dáil, by the whole of the Dáil and by all the parts within it to resolve an issue that needed to be resolved, that was in crisis. And then I can say to the person that asked me a couple of hours ago, can this Dáil succeed? Yes, it can. But if people won't play by the rules, if they won't acknowledge the changes that are there that have to be addressed, well, this Dáil will dissolve sooner rather than later. And an election will be called, and we'll waste another 6 months like the previous 6 months. But that's not casting any dispersion on the public and the result that they gave us to deal with. We've dealt with it like pragmatists, as I've said, like responsible citizens, but ultimately respecting their decision, as convoluted as we might have thought it was in the configuration and the configuration of the representation that we have. So I would earnestly ask the proposer of the motion to not force a vote on this issue, because if it is to be forced, I and my party will be voting against it.
Thank you, Deputy.